Hello, everybody. I'm Daniel Shankin. Welcome to the second annual Mount Tam Integration Jam. I am very glad you're here to help us with our celebration of good psychedelic practice from beginning to end. I am very pleased to be able to introduce to you our guest, Dr. Joe Tafur. Joe Tafur is the author of Fellowship of a River, a series of stories that chronicles his work in the Peruvian Amazon. He also completed his family medical training at UCLA and spent 2 years in academic research at the UCSD Department of Psychiatry in a lab focused on mind-body medicine. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Daniel. It's great to be here. I'm just replying to a little message here from Silas.
Silas, thank you for being here.
Yeah. It's nice to see. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Whoever's here. Thank you, Daniel, for setting all this up and having me here. It's nice to be here. So, am I taking it away here, Daniel? I guess.
Yes. Anything I can do to help, or I can just stay out of the way.
Okay. Good. Yeah, well, I'm going to start. So, this is the integration jam, right, Daniel? So the focus is kind of around integration, but I'm trying to work in some of my other material a little bit, but kind of gearing it towards that. And then I want to leave time for discussion and respond to people's questions or comments. But I'm going to open with this video, just a short trailer. My Modern Spirit, my nonprofit, is teaming up with a group that in Colombia that's making this video, and it's just kind of about like, well, what is integration ultimately down the road? What's the goal of integration? I was just talking to Daniel about. He said, "How do you put it, Daniel? That you're going for the mainstream, or how do you call it?"
We're coming for the mainstream.
Coming for the mainstream. So it's like, our psychedelics going mainstream. So we're coming for the mainstream. So integration. I was just at a mental health conference in Utah last week, Salt Lake City. They had me there to talk about all this stuff, plant medicine and things like that, to talk to mental health people, because it's coming for the mainstream. And so then it's this idea of ketamine's already out there as part of a standard practice that's just growing and growing, whether that's just infusions, but there's a lot of ketamine assisted psychotherapy going on and a lot of integration around that. And what's more is MDMA is supposed to be here next year. And then psilocybin's right behind that. And so the idea is it's integrating the individual, helping the person integrate their experience, but then there's integrating to the culture, at some point, and whatever that means, and integrating into the universe and integrating with nature. So I just want to share a little video that my friends have put together. We're finishing post-production on this film, and just a little glimpse of some Colombian indigenous communities and their perspective on what's going on in the world today. And these are communities that have lived stably with psychedelic substances as part of their world, society, culture, basically forever. So I'm going to first share that video. Daniel, can you turn me on to the screen share?
Sure, one moment.
Thank you. I'm going to share that video with you all, just 2 minutes. Tell me when.
Just right now.
Okay, all right, here we go. So share sound. So here we go. Here's this video. I'll put it up here big. Did I share the sound? Did I forget to share the sound?
I think it's good. Wait, I don't hear it.
Hold on. I'm totally trapped inside this situation here. Let me try one more time. Now I have share sound on. It should work. Let's try it again.
Cada 10 pasos de la Tierra tiene diferentes idiomas, diferentes vibraciones.
Si un pueblo, si una comunidad dice que no tiene arraigos, es campesino, es citadino, es urbano, pero también tiene sus formas de hacer sus pagamentos, sus ofrendas o qué sé yo.
Entre palabras de vida escuchadas en tiempos pasados, hablaron los ancestros de la visita del deshielo, de las avalanchas que provocarían el frío desmedido de la indiferencia o el calor de la rabia y la avaricia.
Tenemos ahí nuestro mundo, nuestro pensamiento, nuestros seres, nuestra creencia, nuestra historia, nuestra creación.
Nosotros ya olvidaremos cómo hacer ofrenda, entonces físicamente nos va a tocar pagar impuestos.
Yo prefiero volver a la forma ancestral tradicional de que en cada clan sean los mayores los que orienten a su clan.
Los pueblos indígenas hablamos de que el espacio de arriba, el espacio en donde habitamos y el espacio de abajo tiene que estar armonizado.
Hay muchas culturas, pero lo que necesitamos es unirnos para recordar los fundamentos y principios de la creación, para que cuando amanezca esa vibración, poner en frecuencia a todos los pueblos.
So I'm a beachside hotel, as you can see here. So yeah, that was just a little video on that. They said you can hear it. I think you could hear it. We no longer see. Oh, did you guys? You couldn't see the video? Were people to see the video the whole time? I hope so. Okay,
I could
good.
see it.
Okay, good. Yeah, amazing project. Okay, wonderful. And so yeah, let's just kind of set the stage for this idea, you know, of like integration and just seeing the idea of it rippling out into the culture. I think that's what we're really heading towards, is like, what does that mean? And that's what we're all worried about. But also, you know, then there's the process on the way. And so I'm going to show some slides now and just walk you through some ideas. We have till like 11:15, is that right, Daniel?
Yes.
Okay. Daniel and I are both wearing G-Shock, by the way, just in case you noticed. So we are synchronized. There we go. All right, here we go. Little slides for you all. Okay, so this is the talk here. All this is me. We just to review that I'm a doctor. You know, did some research in psychiatry. I studied with Shipibo natives and with Ricardo Maringo, my teacher in Peru, for years, and helped run a healing center there for years, and went through the apprenticeship, become ayahuasquero, and helped run ceremony. Currently in the Integrated Medicine Fellowship at University of Arizona. You know, I have a nonprofit, Modern Spirit, doing things like that film, for example, other projects as well. Then my website, and then I'm also part of the Church of the Eagle and the Condor, which is in the process of asking for permission to utilize ayahuasca as a sacred sacrament, you know, as a sacrament in Arizona and in the United States. So I'm going to open going from all the way from these kind of traditional Colombian culture to this modern science. This is from Johns Hopkins. I'm just going to walk you through this slide. It's not going to be all scientific. I know this isn't a scientific talk, but I want to share this idea with you all. Gould Dolan is one of like the leading neuroscience researchers in psychedelics right now from Johns Hopkins, which is, you know, a big time university. And so they talk about this critical window. And so, you know, what is this critical window? They're saying, well, there's these developmental epochs or periods in your life when your nervous system is very sensitive to specific stimuli. And then that's part of what, you know, does this proper circuit organization and learning. So that's a developmental window in childhood when you're like learning socially some stuff and you're really sponging it up and picking it all up. And that's getting laid down during this period that they say, you know, this exuberant brain plasticity is available. There's a lot of opportunity for the brain to change and respond during the early development and for constraints that are imposed on the mechanism as the brain. And then there's constraints that are imposed on these mechanisms as the brain matures. So once the brain matures, say, okay, that's enough. We learn what we need to learn for, you know, at least in these departments, we're going to kind of lock it down. We're going to put some constraints on it. And sometimes these closure of critical periods limits the ability of the brain to adapt. So you're a little bit locked in, even when optimal conditions are restored. So what they do is they have these mice that are somehow socially maladapted. They somehow disturb their development and they miss out on some key learning of their social skills during that window. Window closes and now they can't get the skills and they can't fit in and do the normal mouse things, even if they're put in optimal conditions. So they said, identification of manipulations to reopen critical periods has been a priority for translational neuroscience. That means that they're trying to figure out, can we open this window up? And so that's also true for the society. It's true for all levels. It's like when all the systems are kind of locked in, it's like, well, there's nothing we can do. This is the way it works. This is the way it goes, but then we're trying to open the plasticity again. And then they find with these mice, a single dose of MDMA opens this critical period of social reward learning. They said for like 2 weeks, they give them a single dose. And for those 2 weeks, the plasticity opens again. And now they can relearn this social behaviors and skills and can work through it. So they're saying this has big implications for understanding this disease of social impairments or disorders that are a response to social influence or the result of social injury, like, let's say trauma. So that's what I'm introducing is this, like, okay, we go from the traditional culture to now to the extreme of this is mouse research at MDMA, at Johns Hopkins and with MDMA. And so then the question is like, what opens the window? So they're saying, you put them on MDMA, and then they're saying, you open the window with psilocybin, you open the window with ketamine, actually. You can open the window with all these different things, and these psychedelics, they open this window, and then you get this increased brain plasticity. And so it's like, I put the question out like, well, what is it open to? So we could say, some things shifted. Are you connected to something? That's what people report going through these experiences. I don't know if I can see that. I'm trying to make sure I see the chat in all this. I just realized it's not available to me. Let me just make sure I got the chat access if I can somehow. Where's the chat? I don't know where it is. Daniel, can you tell me if something happens in the chat that I need to know about?
Indeed. Maybe we'll just.
I got it. Here it is.
Yeah, we'll give people time at the end.
Okay. So let's go back. So that's so that's this window. So then the question, well, how do we make the most of the open window? So that's something new we're kind of learning about that she's proposing. Is that yes, there's something big that can happen during the session, but then there's this open window that maybe lines up with what people call like this afterglow period. Or the post, although they were also open, everything was great. And then all things settled back down and they need to go back to the experience again. So how do we make the most of that period? So we know a lot of people are involved in psychedelics. Okay, set and setting, the preparation, how do you prepare for the session? Then you have the session and then there's the integration. Here we are at the integration gym. How do you integrate the session and what does that look like? And maybe it's really important like to do a lot of integration work in that open window. Maybe that's really a big deal according to this new research and maybe according to traditional culture as well. In Navajo culture here in Arizona, like they simplify this whole setup. They talk about set and setting is about love. It's about preparing everything with love, your mindset with love, the setting with love, so that you have the right care to have the gift to have the session when we're going to try to open this window of possibility. And then the integration period is called the responsibility of the gift. So there's a little extra edge on it that it's like, it's not just about integrating whatever. Here's a quick question from, it does vary, Sarah, from substance to substance. I'm just going to throw this out there in answer to her question. He suggested waiting to the end, but I'm just going to touch on this. I talked to her on the phone, Goldolan, so I don't have all the details. I'm not an expert in the field. She suggested to me on the phone, and there's still a lot to be learned, that it's the longer the person is altered, it affects the extent of the window period. So that's something like ketamine would have a shorter window period. Maybe some of the other stuff, the shorter stuff, the really short stuff like 5-MeO or whatever would be much shorter. So that may be a factor. Thoughts on using microdosing post-ceremony would impact the changes that haven't. So that's another question we're still learning about. So they haven't quite done that research. Does microdosing help open this stuff? To what degree how strong does the effect have to be for the window to be open? And that is something they're researching. So I don't have all those answers. I'm just throwing these topics out to you that this is stuff that's getting explored. But getting back to, okay, the window's open, we're trying to deal with the window, we're trying to make the most of it. And so then this traditional cultural kind of approach is like the responsibility of the gift. You know, it's not just like, oh, I'm integrating to do, it's like, no, you like, if you don't do this, if you don't put in your part, if you don't do your part, then you'll waste it. You know, you'll lose it. You'll lose this opportunity. So you need to do something about it. And so then ketamine, I think, is an interesting thing because however people feel about it, it's just something that's just expanding across the country. You know, there's business reasons and there's all kinds of, and there's also reasons because people are looking for help, and then some people are really finding help with this. And then you go to these psychedelic little discussions, like ketamine's not psychedelic. Well, I had my first experience 2 weeks ago at this, or 2 or 3 weeks ago at this training. And that was one of the weirdest experiences of my life. I have drank a lot of ayahuasca, tried a lot of other things. And so I definitely would call that psychedelic. Myself and multiple people there all reported thinking they were in this movie. Like, it wasn't just me. More than one of us thought we were in this Everything Everywhere All at Once at the center of the metaverse for some period of time. So, you know, I think it is interesting. And, you know, with something like ketamine, set and setting and all that stuff is really important. You know, here we have the Maloca Niuera, where I used to work in Peru on the right, you know, a place that's been, you know, is constantly being cared for and prepared at multiple levels, right? Multi-dimensional levels with spiritual concerns in the mix. And then, you know, all the dimensions of care that are put into these psychedelic psychotherapy setting rooms. So, you know, even with ketamine, this is the artwork that I was inspired to create after the second ketamine session. I just, you know, whatever, from the center of the metaverse, that you talk to people that are doing this work with people, friends of mine, and they say, you know, if the person is not prepared, like if they don't have any experience with therapy or some kind of language to process the experience, that they're not going to get that much out of it. And so we have a program here in Arizona where we're providing ketamine-assisted psychotherapy to Native Americans. So we're trying, well, it's from fundraise money. So we're asking them, hey, how do we maximize? You know, we want to have good results with the people. And they brought this to my attention. Like, if the person is not prepared, is not ready to try to do work with a material that arises, or prepared to kind of do, you know, go into this insight into themselves, it's not going to work. Like, they've seen it just open and close, open and close, open and close. So then you see this reality of like, okay, for integration to be an effective goal, then how prepared is the person going in? So, and the way that works for them is, you know, therapy sessions beforehand with the practitioner. That some of the ketamine places, they're not interested in doing that, but the reality is, are they really going to get the kind of results that are possible? So the idea is like, you have some therapy sessions, you have some time with people to get to know them and to talk to them and try to understand, you know, what they're working towards, and build that trust and have them open up to you, and that they're going to be able to work through this stuff. Another big thing that is coming out of this work I'm, you know, just visiting different places. There's not all this research, but there's a couple of research sources that they're saying, you know, one of the ideas is like, okay, because ketamine is shorter and the window period is shorter, then maybe you need to hit it like multiple times, you know, within 1 week, 2 or 3 times, to really get the person up into some malleable place. That's one idea. Another idea was, I was with Prati in Colorado, and they're like, well, really for them, the most important thing is to do a therapy session. They do a 2-hour or 3-hour session with people where they spend a lot of time processing with them as they come down. But one of the pivotal things they commented was, you need to do a session like the next day. Within 24 to 48 hours, you need to do therapy with that person. And that's when you're going to get the big results. My friend Adele of France, who's a researcher in this field, she did research with ketamine, then they have a certain kind of therapy, emotionally focused therapy. So they did ketamine session, and the next day, emotionally focused therapy the next day. And then they were getting the same kind of emotional breakthrough results that, and I'll touch on that in a little bit later, as the psilocybin research from Imperial College of London. So the idea is maybe taking advantage of this window period, or taking advantage of early integration, is actually more important than multiple experiences. You know, that's a thought to throw out there. And then at the end of the day, supportive community, what a difference it makes. So for us, let's see, seems to increase after one comes down from ketamine. Yeah, so this is interesting stuff. So the idea is, that neuroplasticity window that they're suggesting, they're saying they have data at Johns Hopkins that it opens and stays open for a couple of days or maybe longer. So then the idea is, okay, when we were at that training, like the cool thing about doing ketamine in that setting was we were in a retreat. The training was a retreat. So when we had our big experiences and be like, whoa, what was that? I was in the metaverse and we're coming down. We're with a bunch of people. And as far as having a strong, maybe we took a little bit too much and it wasn't what you give somebody in the clinic setting. But the idea of like getting sent home in an Uber and being alone after that was like, whoa, a lot of people are like, wow, that would be too intense. So this idea of having a supportive community, like where do you take this stuff and how important is that to be able to share and talk about? Because so many times we hear about people that don't have that opportunity to, they go to Peru down with us for 10 days. They come home, they don't know who to talk to about it, And so again, if there's a window in that case that's kind of coming down a bit, and then they don't have a chance to work through what they've been working through, they lose some time there. It's hard to strengthen that integration without the supportive community or without some kind of support, whether that's a therapist or, an understanding loved one or some community. And so you see also these like integration circles popping up. There's probably people here interested. I know Daniel's an integration coach, but maybe in the future will be popping up around some of these ketamine clinics. Maybe that's something they need to consider is like, how do you manage that? How do you have opportunities for people to share in that fashion? And there's so much experience with the communal kind of benefit that is possible. Hard to know how that's going to work in some clinic setting, but like at a retreat center, like at Niue Rao, or they're doing research at Salt Lake City, even in psilocybin. So they're doing with 4 people. So those 4 people are going through it and then they're sharing their experience together. And there's all this extra that comes from that. So that's, my book that was introduced, Fellowship at the River, that I, been going around talking about for 5 years now. And I'm just saying that, what do people go down all the way down to South America to these cultures, and what are they finding down there? And my big point that I try to make is they're finding a culture that acknowledges the emotional and spiritual dimensions of illness. And that's why they get so much further. So then that's, I'm bringing this up as part of this talk is the spiritual side of things that is, not always welcome, or people have their religious trauma and it's tough to talk about what it is. But then, for me, it's like, well, what is this that people are getting open to? And when you talk to them going through the experience, it seems like they're getting open to some kind of connection, something that feels metaphysical for many people. And that seems to play a big role in what's going on. So with Jones integration, just dosed you and sent you your way. Yeah, no, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of those clinics out there. Our thing is that, that's a business, but there's more that can be done with those people. And so if we look at some of the traditional culture, when I was down there with Ricardo working in Peru, a big part of what we found was so pivotal to bring people to was connecting people to nature, connecting people to community, giving them an opportunity to connect to spiritual themes. In other words, if they have experiences of what they consider to be sacred, that they can talk about it. And hello over there. And so that's what I found to be so helpful was like, okay, what about the retreat center? So then we're hearing about the idea of ketamine retreats. They're doing ketamine trainings. What if you did a retreat? And in that retreat, what if you had like, ceremonial, spiritual elements? If you opened it a certain way, if you had a sweat lodge, if you had this, you had different elements, and then you have the people go through it and you have them in community while they go through it and process together. What would that be like? What if you did it in a natural setting? Would that give them more an advantage to go deeper? That's what the traditional culture says. And this is the aerial view of Niue Rao, on the edge of a national forest in Peru. We opened in 2011. So after being down there for all those years and working with people, connecting them to nature, connecting them to spirit, with ayahuasca ceremony in part, and also the diets. So then what's the traditional Shipibo kind of perspective on this window period? It's like, well, their big thing is you have to do the diet. So they're like, the diet is the most crucial thing in the Shipibo kind of mindset around the healing process that people might have at a place like Niwerao, where there is the opportunity to do ayahuasca, to be part of ayahuasca ceremony. But more important is the diet. That's the idea, this to prepare the being, the person to take advantage, to make the most out of that. So they think, when they hear about weekend ceremony opportunity, they're just like, that's not really going to do it. Like what the person needs in an extended retreat, they need a timeout. They need a chance to let this stuff sink in. So that's called the vegetalista diet. So in their mind and guided by the plant spirits of the Amazon is this idea of, having a very restrictive diet, staying away from sex, staying away from alcohol or drugs, and just being very kind of clean and pure without any distraction, kind of like a meditation retreat, encouraging people to isolate and spend a lot of time with themselves. Then they're given these master plants, right, that are just there to guide them, that aren't necessarily psychoactive, that are there for spiritual reasons. And then it's within that context that they do ayahuasca ceremony. And that ayahuasca ceremony is to, there's a lot that can happen there. There's no question that there's some healing that happens within the ceremonies, and the icaros and that technology with the songs is a big part of that. But it's the continued work of being with all that stuff in nature, in community, perhaps in isolation, in the diet, that is what allows this stuff to sink in. That's really the traditional perspective and based on traditional experience. Let's see what people say here. And some people talking about some diet stuff, deep work. Yeah, concretized within me as a foundation for my healing practice. That's this idea of like concretizing this. I feel like combo before ayahuasca really helped me. So there's other ways that people do that, so the combo is interesting. It's a matter of when we do these kind of mixes and matches and bring all these different cultures together, that we're careful, that we find ways to be careful about it and responsible. And so there are people that do something like combo, which is a big purgative to help clear them out, open them up. And, who knows what that does for your neuroplasticity as well. And then you're kind of ready. Maybe you have a diet, you have something to receive. So this, any which way we're talking about, opening the space with love, trying to make room for the gift, then the responsibility of the gift. And then the question is, well, how does the healer or the therapist, honor this gift? So then that's another big factor in first in the ceremony or in the session itself, and then in the follow-up, integration sessions or integration coaching, whatever it is, integration circle, culture in which people are, continuing to process within, is like these three big factors that I find that, my experience, that's the difference between like what allows for people to be more open-minded about these topics and what doesn't. And when I hear somebody's very close-minded about stuff, or they think it's too woo-woo, or they don't want to hear about the mystical side, it kind of sparks it up in me that I kind of realize, well, maybe this person hasn't really been held in a certain kind of way. Because in my experience, when you do hold the person in this kind of way, that for long enough, so let's say if you're a new Rao and you have a 10-day diet, like by the third or fourth ceremony, most people, very high percentage of people who, whether or not they were atheists beforehand or, anti-spiritual or just overly traumatized by religion, by the third or fourth, within a diet, they start asking questions, about mystical things that they sense. And so that's also related somehow to this openness, to this connection, and somehow it's floating around there. And so how do you help people get there? Well, the place has to be safe. It has to be safe for them. It has to be safe. Like, what does safe mean? Safe means safe. Safe means like you feel your child is safe to hang out with this person. Anything that looks unsafe, well, that's not safe. At least you have to be able to address it transparently to answer whatever concern somebody might have about what that is. Next, you have to be safe to be vulnerable. So that many people have not been held in their spiritual community or their religious community. Maybe they felt safe, no one's going to injure them, but they can't be vulnerable there, or maybe they can, but sometimes they can't. If they can't be vulnerable in this session or in this ceremony, well, then they're not going to make that kind of progress. And in the therapy afterwards as well. And then the final piece to make it really work is that space where they're safe and they can be vulnerable, it has to be beyond judgment. So then that speaks to the preparation of of the individuals holding that space. That to be able to transcend judgment, to be able to not be triggered by whatever it is that's coming up from that person, from their life, from what they've done or what's happened to them, that you're going to be able to still, have some loving presence for them while they're going through all that is a practice, right? We have to learn, we have to grow, we have to train in order to do that for people. So if we do that, as I would say, for me, ceremony, ritual, with our spiritual community here, like those are just basics, like that has to be in place. And then afterwards for the integration, that has to be in place. So I'm just throwing that out there for you as like kind of experience. So responsibility of the gift, what is integration? Of my friend, Rachel Harris, who wrote Listening to Ayahuasca, she's writing a new book and exploring this topic. And we were sitting around talking about, what is integration? What is integration? And I threw it out to my class and to other people, just bouncing the question off people. First thing is like integration is time. That's what a lot of people say. Integration is time. So the idea of having time, between sessions, time to process, time to not overreact or say, oh my God, I have to do this tomorrow. I have to do this tonight. I have to do, time to integrate it. That it takes time to digest things. It takes time to make sense of things. Then the other thing is like being integral. So integral. So what is an integral, integration, integral? What does all that mean? Like integral means like you're going to become part of the whole. So one point that I always like to repeat is my friends from Colombia, Soji, who made the movie, and then her teacher were on a talk with us. And then the guy said, if this kind of medicine or this kind of work is making you feel better than or more special or, extra special, or just you're the magic one, you're the best, something that everybody else doesn't know, then it's not working. This is from their cultural experience. This is from them watching people go through these training processes. They're not seeing it for the first time. They've seen it generations play out, how people go through this. As they say, you should be feeling more a part of the whole. That's when it's working. You understand how it's all interconnected. You understand how you're part of it, and you're not so much worried about distinguishing yourself from all the rest. And so then it demonstrates itself through behavior change. So another thing, because integration is behavior change. So in other words, is the person, their goals of what they're hoping to change or hoping to improve in their relationships, in the way they deal with stress, and how they treat themselves, is this behavior changing? If it's not, I guess it's not really integrating. And is there follow through in that process? So I'll get back to that towards the end here. So then, another form of integration is like, reflection and taking time out to think about it or talk about it or work through it. Like people are journaling or they're writing things down or they're making artwork or they're making music or they're coming up with dance and all different ways that people are expressing and trying to kind of explore what they learned and let it out of themselves and see, how that looks to them and how that might change their perception. And then the last piece that I put here, or second to last piece, practice and discipline. One of the people in my group, in my class, they're like, well, the reality of integration, this was her opinion, is that it takes a lot of discipline, that it's not easy. And so she's like, it's kind of like, exercise or all these other kind of goals of daily practice, whatever it is, it's not easy. So most people won't do it, was her point, that there's actually discipline involved. And I think that's very much the traditional perspective, that there's going to be challenges to the process that you're going to have to push through. And so it involves practice and discipline integration. So then she also brought up, but the thing is, because it's going to be challenging and because it's going to be difficult sometimes, and the reality is you're going to need some support. So what kind of support do you have in place in order to keep going, when it's hard? So in my book, I present these cases of like, this is different, health problems that people had. And as a doctor trying to make my case when I'm putting the book out, it was like, well, I knew I would have to follow the people for years to make a case for like, that is this real? That somebody did this with a 2-week diet, or somebody did it with a 5-month diet, or somebody had a one-night experience, but then took on all this dedication and discipline to keep carrying out everything they learned from that and then follow it out. like I said, then you can see what it was. What was the difference? The guy, the anxiety case I presented at the end of the book, I end the book with a case that's like kind of open-ended. Like, did he really get better or not? Because he had huge experiences on his diet, but when he went home, he realized he was too isolated and he didn't have any support and didn't really go anywhere. He was on like a little WhatsApp group or Facebook or something for a little while, but he needed more support. Then the addiction case, had his ups and downs. He had relapses. He was coming up better, coming up stronger than before, but his baseline kept moving up. But he struggled still. And it wasn't until he got into like NA and some social support of that were, very important in order to maintain sobriety and kind of move forward, to kind of solidify the behavior change. Experiences of less suffering can help build a desire to be more disciplined. True. Making that connection can take time, which is where integration support can really serve. Yes. So we have 15 minutes left. I'm just going to just pop down some other stuff. So this is what we just went over. I'm just going to touch on some other stuff quickly. I'm going to breeze through this. This is just my stuff about, what are we connecting to, and the energy, this idea that we're connecting to something, so this experience of less suffering, of feeling that support at kind of a hyperdimensional level. I have this concept from my book of like how it is that the spiritual and the metaphysical bridge to the material and the allopathic, but the idea being that there's some kind of this Shipibo, in this case, the Ikaro, the song, being some kind of energetic stimulus, to help drive like a process that's going to help facilitate some transformation of trauma, but that the person's personal experience, like what it looks like for them, whether they're a materialist or whether they're spiritual or not spiritual, that the patients themselves, the clients, they're going through like a forgiveness process. They're going through self-love, process, compassion, gratitude. Like that was very consistent in all the people that I saw. There's a link to the image somewhere. I'll find it for you. So I need to put it up somewhere. It's been a part of my class. So then I've been talking about everywhere I go, like where do these emotional and spiritual influences touch the flesh, where there's kind of this energy, this connection, and how does that play into it? And so I'm just briefly touching on this for you. Is just this idea that there's an emotional body. So not just in the psychology, but in the whole body, and the psychoneural endocrine immunologic network that is this interconnected place of your mind and the brain and the emotional processing brain, and the way that moves into the autonomic nervous system that is part of your body, and the way that's wired into parts of your immune system, and the way that's wired into parts of your hormonal system. And this is an example of like PTSD, which is a big, poster child for psychedelic psychotherapy because of the MAPS MDMA trial and all the results they're getting. So this idea that this is like a whole body type thing. It's not just a brain thing. It's not just a psychological thing. And how do you address this deeper stuff? And it's like, so the emotional body, is where this stuff happens. I make this point in my book that, once you see that somebody has a problem in what I call the emotional body, and you've used the Western techniques to rule out any other cause of illness, and you don't see any other clear cause, but you see measurable dysfunction. I'll put a link up to the book almost soon. Is to, I'm saying to measurable to dysfunction in multiple regions of the emotional body. So I'm saying if they're having nightmares, and they're having inflammation problems, and they're having cortisol problems, and they're having heart, stuff, and blood pressure stuff, and you can't figure out what it is, I'm like, well, maybe it's time for a more holistic approach. And this includes a lot of the emotional disturbance that's underlying what brings a lot of people to psychedelic psychotherapy, whether that's PTSD or whether that's anxiety or depression or addiction. Again, how do you hold people through that kind of work? That's holistic work. So in my book, I talk about this guy, Russ, who was a PTSD guy from Vietnam, and the big healing that he had, just within 10 days after spending 40 years with PTSD, when he got held in that kind of space, brought into the retreat, got into the nature and the community and the spiritual connection with the ceremony, but also the diet. And this period of time to really take advantage of the work that he was doing, in those ceremony nights. And he had a big shift. I've been pushing this. We have an epigenetics trial, so this is like, we're doing this hearts and souls. And I'm just always talking about the bridging of science and spirituality. I'm saying, well, it's happening at this emotional body level, and it's happening at the epigenome, which I'm not going to get all into right here, but he mentioned it. Daniel mentioned it when we were preparing for this, like maybe you could talk about that, but that's this idea of like somehow this plasticity that opens up. There's this theory that part of that plasticity is going to be like one of these places where things close is around epigenetics, around the way that the genes, the expression of the genes can be modified, that maybe trauma can affect, we know trauma can affect that stuff. And I'll stop here in a minute just to give you the questions. Trauma can affect that stuff, but then how do we reopen that plasticity to change it again? And we said, well, maybe that's what's happening with MDMA, assisted psychotherapy. We're running our trial. We're getting results. It looks like that's true. We're having results that show, yes, there are epigenetic shifts happening. So we're publishing that soon. And so then what part does that play in the responsibility of the gift of like, if people have big openings and big shifts, how do you lock that in, make it last? So I'm just going to stop here so we can get into some questions, because the rest is more of the same. But this connection that we're walking people to, and this integration from the indigenous perspective, when we get back to the beginning of the video, it's like in the Americas, it's basically this path of healing is seen as the same as your spiritual path. And so the ultimate integration is to be involved in the kind of practices that are going to maintain that connection. And that perhaps it's that connection which helps provide the plasticity to be able to shift and change. So there's a little more here, but I'm gonna drop it there because I wanna deal with some questions and stuff. But I wanted to kind of open up with that. I mean, I guess it's a little abrupt, but I feel like I don't want to run out of time, and I want to talk to people.
That's okay. That's good stuff. Somebody does have their hand raised. Lindsay, do you want to type your question in? And then Rebecca says that she really likes combo before her ayahuasca ceremony to open her up and connect with the medicine and increase neuroplasticity and help set intention. Do you want to comment on combo?
I commented during while I was speaking, I commented a little bit about that chat. And so, I think that, that's an interesting addition. I think the combo, there's just a touch on this when we talk about combo and ayahuasca. It's like there's a Brazilian tradition that utilizes that. And the question is, okay, well, how close to these things do you do it? And there was the incident at Soul Quest in Florida where they were doing tons of ayahuasca, and then Sunday morning, bunch of combo, and a kid died. He had a seizure disorder, undisclosed, and all that stuff. But then it's like when we're mixing and matching, that we at least draw on the experience of the traditions. Why? For safety. In other words, if you're going to do things a certain way, have they done that before? And I know, yes, people do combo before ayahuasca down in Brazil, but I'm just mentioning that point as we touch on this topic. But I think that's another idea of like, how do you get the ball rolling?
Yeah, I think that's also really important, because I do see retreats where it almost seems like there's a competition to see how many molecules you can jam into somebody's body at once over the course of a weekend.
That's it, and so that's what people are kind of criticizing. And I, again, we get back into like the experience of the traditional cultures. And it's like, okay, so these are people that have been working with these substances. In the Amazon, you have access to many substances, like many all around you. And they don't find that to be effective. That's their personal experience. And so then now, go ahead, Daniel.
I was just going to say, you hear about people working with plant medicines. They'll do a dieta for a month.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's no hurry. There's like, you're going to build a relationship with this plant for a while and see what's revealed over time.
Well, and that's it. And what's revealed over time is what it's all about, right? Because you see this, somebody just, I was at this Chacruna event a couple of weeks ago, and my friend Melody Hayes, she's this kind of very spiritually oriented person, and she was really kind of not attacking, but scolding the psychedelic community. She's like, are these people really well and healthy? Like this, this people right here. It's like, because they're just talking about getting to their next experience, and oh my God, if you do this and then you do that and then you shove this in your ear, and then boom, then you're going to touch the enlightenment, and then you have all the answers. But it's like, well, that doesn't really, like, where is the integral part of that? In other words, what's happening with that person? What's happening? One of the slides that I skipped was, this idea of the traditional culture. It's like, okay, what are we trying to integrate toward?
Right.
Like, the goal of holistic health and well-being. And the indigenous perspective, it's about, right relationship. So they're saying, you got to be in right relationship with yourself. Like, how well are you treating yourself? right relationship with your loved ones. How's that going with your, your relationships, your intimate relationships, and ones that may be very troubled? How are you handling all that with your community? How's that going with your society, with your ecosystem, and then with the universe? That there's actually
Right.
like a goal.
Well, I think that's really nice that you mentioned this period of time after, because I just know for me, when I have a really powerful spiritual experience, a real like connection to the divine or what have you, it's really painful for me to come down. Like I don't like losing sight of that. And I have found that spending time in meditation, working to actively stay connected to it, helps ground it in my system. And I get to like integrate the thing, and I have a better chance of being that I saw myself as.
Well, I think that's really important. And it's important to, as we make the shift towards a more integrated, kind of direction, the goal is that this thing that you had access to is always there.
Yeah.
Like I get into it with my older brother he gets like that. He comes down all frustrated. How come I'm always not like that? Well, I should always and like, well, you're frustrated because you just want to beat yourself up again.
Yes.
That's what you're doing, which is fine, that we can address that. But that doesn't really have anything to do with the access to this thing. Like that, to have bigger access, yeah, you're going to have to stop beating yourself up. Like that's a good one. Duly noted. And then the idea is this is always there. And so then that's really important, because then it's like, then it's about that, those realms of divinity and that connection being something that we have potential access to, that psychedelics may help us access, but they're not the only way to access it.
Sure.
So we should be inspired. Ideally, we would be inspired rather than, but that happened. I thank you for being honest about that, because it's a common thing people do.
And then, of course, just kind of being okay with who we are, kind of like on an average day to day. Can I just be a guy who sometimes gets frustrated and sometimes is stuck in traffic and sometimes, isn't as cool as I could be. And okay. And I can just be okay with that while working to get better and not having to chase some sort of ideal in order to get out of who I am.
Well, and that's just it, because then again, we're trying to be like, the Colombian guys saying, you want to be the superhero, like all of us, right? Me too. It's like, you think you should be able to perform at this level, and then you are a humble human being and you fall short, and it's like, oh, I'm supposed to be, again, it becomes a thing. Like, I know I hate to bring, but, a close person in my life who they're like reading Paramahansa Yogananda and like, well, you'll be enlightened, because when you're enlightened, you have all the access to the omniscience and all that kind of stuff. And because I'm not there, it's another reason for me to hate on myself.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if you can't love yourself in this moment, then yeah, you're not there, and that doesn't mean it means that you're able to love yourself in this moment, not because you're perfect. And so I think that's what is so important, about integrating it into the society, into everyday life, that the sacred, as this stuff bleeds over, maybe, then there'll be more evidence of the celebration of the sacred around us. So that'll make it easier, because it does seem like there's a lot of force in the society that's kind of like very much excluding that kind of energy, and it makes it harder. So that's one of the goals, like getting back to how we started. It's like, okay, once we start opening this stuff up, and not just about people to feel high and, oh, they did this and they talked to, I don't know who, God or whatever it was, but like that they're really bringing a connection that's bringing more health, to themselves and their community, then maybe that's kind of stuff will be, then there's like, hey, it won't be so odd. Hey, wow, this Native American over here in, Sedona, one of my friends, Navajo friend, she went to go like make offerings at some creek, but it's on private property now. And whatever, the local guy just totally gave her a hard time and just, get out of here, all that stuff. And she's like, I'm just doing the offerings on the creek like we've always done here, like I'll be out of your way. And like for one day for that to shift to where it's like, okay, let her do it, and let her move on her way. So I don't know. I think as opposed to how to harness the sacred and sell. Yeah, I mean, sacred has to be the most free thing.
Mhm.
I mean, it is the most free thing. Of course, everyone wants to harness and sell it just because everyone's trying to get rich, or we all need money, or it'd be nice to make money easier. But I don't know. I was just watching the PTL Tammy Faye movie. The Tammy Faye movie.
I remember them.
Yeah, remember. And so it's just this whole, I don't know. They're on drugs. They're like, they had to take pills and do all this other stuff just to get by their day to day. Just to put on the show. It's not integrated. So yeah, creating a sacred place in your home as a daily reminder. So that's what we're talking about. For me, is like that idea of the spirituality, whatever that is, but to acknowledge this spiritual context or some kind of higher dimensional context or metaphysical stuff that you make contact with that is so inspiring to you, and that gives you the space and the place to process out some stuff that was just too hard to process otherwise. Yeah. It's like, how can we find ways to respect that with each other and celebrate that with each other? And then maybe that would help us kind of back.
Well, and that's also going to help us. One of my teachers would talk about, you don't want to pave over your emotional life. Sometimes, people want to stay high and they pretend they don't feel grief and they don't feel angry and everything's only good vibes. And that kind of sticks out to the outsider. People who are divorcing themselves from things that they deem not sacred enough. And then, when you're going to your event in Utah, we talk about, interfacing with the mainstream is maybe the way to say it. We're interfacing with the mainstream. What sort of example are we providing as people who are doing this work? Like, do we seem unhinged? Do we seem divorced from reality? Or do we seem integrated? And so, what is the representation there of what this work produces?
That's it. That's the end of the story. That's whether or not the establishment. I'm going to address Silas's point here in a second, but in no way, I guess we have to finish. But whether the establishment wants just to come down on this and close this down and shut this down and blah blah blah. But if you leave the door wide open for them, by leaving a mess where you go, it just makes it that much easier. So, and why would people even want to see this part of their society and their culture unless it was providing that kind of healthier environment for children? And so then Silas asked, how do we not keep chasing the window? So in other words, because we bring access to it in our everyday life. We find ways, whether it's, as we started the conversation, whether that's meditation or dancing or sex magic or all these different things that are going to help us stay connected and stay without chasing it with psychedelics. And then with psychedelics, then to draw on the traditional culture, they say, keep it in the medicine. So it's like, we don't just do it because we're chasing a window. That's not the reason to do it. Say we do it, the traditional culture is like, this is for healing. We keep it in the medicine. If you do it for that, because you're chasing a window, they're saying for them, that's bad luck. Just to go that far with it. They're saying you're playing a little bit, with something that maybe you shouldn't play with. So they say that, not just for them, it means something a little deeper. So we say, keep it in the medicine. Don't get ahead of the medicine. So in other words, when our interaction with these substances and these ways, because it is a delicate matter, one way to guide us through that, where we know there's pitfalls left and right, it's obvious, is to keep, our goals, our humble goal towards health and healing, and saying, well, okay, I'm going to try to promote my wellness. I'm trying to find ways to come to deeper wellness. So I think that's it, huh? We're done, Daniel?
That's it. Thank you. And, I really love that you're leaving us with, we know there's pitfalls left and right.
It's
should not be a surprise to us. But I do appreciate the centered, integral approach and energy that you brought to us today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody. So yeah, the book, I'll just put that in the thing. It's called Fellowship of the River. You can find it. It's in my bio, right, Daniel, on the thing, the title of the book?
It's in the bio. And if you go to the TAM Integration website, there's a bookstore, and it's in the bookstore. It's one of the, it's one of the top 3 things that I send people to when they say, hey, I read Michael Pollan's book. What should I read next?
Thank you, Daniel, so much. This is it, Daniel. I'm locked in with you now. We have the G-Shock, everything.
It's been a good time. Hopefully first of many.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for everything. Thanks for the support. Fellows from the River, the book. One thing I just will plug, but I don't want to be a jerk, but Modern Spirit is, we have a GoFundMe for the post-production of that movie that you saw, The Thing. You can find it on our Facebook, on my Instagram, and we need to put it on the website of Modern Spirit. I'll put it on the website soon. But we're just trying to raise a little bit of money to polish the color and the sound to get ready for Netflix or whatever it is.
And we're making a donation. Part of your ticket goes to this project as well.
Right on.
And Paul Mark, many of you saw Paul Mark was part of our opening circle, and he's going to be talking about mirror work. He's wonderful. So please stick around. And if you feel like chatting in the Discord channel, that's available too. Joe, thank you. Many blessings. Much love.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you so much.